It's October 7th. We just had a cold front push through last night. And I come in tonight with Zach, did a hanging hunt in our creek bottom unit. This summer we found a bunch of buck beds in there.
Yeah, it's definitely Ray. I'm 100% positive it's him. Oh, here comes a third buck.
This is a stand that Zach and Aaron hung at the beginning of the season, but this is smack dab in the middle. We're back here in the creek bottom unit in the buck nest.
Midwest Whitetail is brought to you by Hoyt Archery, Fuse Accessories, Realtree, Muddy Outdoors, Cabela's, Rocket Broadheads, Scott Archery, Frigid Forage, Trophy Rock, Easton Arrows, RTP Outdoors, Non-Typical Wildlife Solutions, Ozonics, Wilderness Athlete, Grizzly Coolers, Redneck Hunting Blinds, and Nikon.
Well, we're back in the buck nest today, and what I wanted to do was actually get down in some of these beds. If you remember back last October, we were set up around the edge of this thing watching deer stand up, and right now I'm actually about 100 yards from the tree that Corey and I were set up in. Around about October 10th or so, we watched those two bucks stand up out here, and I'm actually in one of their beds, and I can see deer hair in here real fresh. They've been in here a bunch. You can tell, like, this sapling here is broke. These are all rubbed up behind me, these little saplings. And this stuff is pretty short right now because it's the middle of the winter. But I'm actually down in the bed like the deer would be laying here. And I'm looking at what he can see across this grass, trying to decide where I can get a tree stand at. And they typically bed here on a west wind, coming from the creek, from this direction. So it's got to be somewhere across this field. We were really close to him that night, but we still couldn't get him within bow range. If we'd have got up another 4 or 5 feet in that tree, he would have seen us. So that's a good thing to keep in mind when you're scouting these areas like this time of year. That grass is going to be taller next fall whenever you come in here to hunt, but if you can set up at the right height to be out of sight right now, you're definitely going to be able to set up at the right height in the fall. This is one of those primary beds though. I mean, they've been using this thing all year long, no doubt about it. I'm actually standing over here in Ray's bed from last fall. The very first night we sat here was, I believe, October 7th, when Zach and I were straight across this field, about 300 yards from this spot, and we watched Ray stand up out of this bed. And it's a pretty well-worn bed for a buck. You can actually see which direction he's facing. And that night, it was a west wind coming right at my back, blowing out to that field. And as he's laying here in it, he's laying just like this in this kind of banana shape, and he's facing that direction. You can see all this brush and stuff is kind of grown up around this, so it's got him nice and nestled in here. And he can stand up and he can survey that entire field. He can see a lot of it bedded right here, which is going to make it tough to get in and hunt this spot. But the creek is right behind him. Not very many predators are going to come through that creek. Coyotes, bobcats, and stuff don't like water like that. Most of the time it's deep enough that very few predators would cross it. So he's got winded back right there coming off that ridge. He's laying right here in this spot. We watched him stand up out of it. So pretty cool to actually get over here and see it for the first time. And now we're gonna go down there and see if we can pick out a tree and make up a better game plan for next fall in this spot. Not much hair in it. There's another good one right here. There's a little bit of hair in this one. You can see that willow over my shoulder, and that was our marker all fall for these bucks. And we walked up to the willow, and we're probably 40 yards from it now. And there's about half a dozen very big, very well-worn beds in between that willow and us. And these are the beds that I watched the deer stand up out of multiple times. They were always out here. I think 5 or 6 sits, and there was always a buck bedded right here. And at one time, Sean and I were on the ground about 60 yards from this spot. This is definitely where they want to be. I mean, there's tons of hair in these beds. Haven't found a shed yet, but this is the spot. I just got to figure out how to hunt them in here, because they're only in here on specific winds. It's a westerly wind. Every time we saw them, or a northwest. We saw a buck in here on a southwest. I'd ideally like to hunt it on a south of some sort. That would enable us to come up the creek and pop into a tree right here 40, 50 yards from the beds themselves, but it would make sense for the bucks to be here on that wind. Pretty neat actually getting to come out here and seeing the exact spots where they're laying at. They're very worn. This is just bare dirt down here. Right now we're right at the end of this point of the island in the buck nest, but the thing you can really tell with this rub is it's super high on the tree. That's a huge tree. I mean, you can see the deep gouge marks in it from the tines. But my friend Dan Infalt is always talking about looking at rub height and not the overall size of the tree or the aggressiveness of the rub per se. It makes a lot of sense. You know, as a buck gets older, his skeletal structure is growing all the way up until he's 4 or 5 years old. That's making him taller every year. So what his theory is that older, more mature bucks rub higher on the trees. And it would make perfect sense in this case. I mean, this rub comes up almost to my chest on this tree. And it's obviously a big deer that's doing it. I mean, it's got tine marks clear up in here at my shoulder. You know, and all the way around the tree. There's even some old spots on there where that tree has been rubbed in the past. I mean, it's a huge tree. The tine marks go up really high, and we know that there's 2 or 3 really big bucks in this area that are 5+ years old. So pretty good odds that they're making this rub, especially the ones higher up on the tree.
I'm out for a little walk today trying to find some antlers. That might be something of a lost cause. We still aren't having very much luck finding sheds. Same thing I talked about last week and the week before that, I think, is the bucks are so spread out. It has been so mild that there's food everywhere. So the antlers are spread out and we're not having much success finding them. Plus, I do think a lot of bucks are still carrying their antlers. But I'm going to work my way along this edge, and then somewhere along here I'm going to stop and talk a little bit about how to age bucks on the hoof. This is a topic that we dive into every couple of years on the show, and we keep learning a little bit along the way. So I'm going to pass along what tips that I have and some of the challenges that come with trying to age these bucks. I'm standing in the spot right now where we were getting the early trail camera photos of the buck skinny that I killed last season. And we first started to notice that deer, or first saw that deer in early November down along this little brushy fence line in front of me. And at that time, Greg and I were in the redneck blind, and we figured he's probably 4 years old, just judging by the shape of his body, looking at the deer. You know, I'd never really seen the deer before, had any real history with him, or at least not that we were able to recognize. Didn't think a whole lot of him. I almost considered that buck to be a cull back in 2015. I think I would have been tempted to shoot him had he come within bow range. But then behind me on this hill, this is clover and alfalfa field behind me. This is where the guys were filming him during the summer of 2016. I think it was in early August when they started filming him here. And the buck blew way up. He probably put on at least 35 gross inches from 2015 to 2016. Now we're guessing him to be a 5-year-old. But the question is, are we even correct? I'll have to send the teeth in to find out for sure. So that's the dilemma that you run into. When bucks show up that you don't have a lot of history with, it's a lot harder to place them in those age categories because every one of them is a little bit different in the way their bodies are built. I've been wrong before. An example of that was a buck that I killed back in 2011. Pretty well documented story of the G5 buck. That deer started showing up in 2009 as a 2-year-old. Big bodied and pretty decent antlers, probably 130-inch type antlers. And we filmed him in a couple of different spots on the farm in 2009. Of course, he wasn't a buck that I was going to shoot, but we had at least a fair amount of experience with him or history with him, figuring him to be probably 3. Well, then he shows up the next year on trail camera, looks pretty solid, nice looking deer, and I figured he was probably 4 in 2010. And I was actually trying to hunt the deer. Almost killed him in, I think it was early December. Not too far from where I'm standing now. The stand made a little noise on the cold day. He heard that, turned around and ran off, or I might have ended up killing him as a 3-year-old. And that would have been pretty unfortunate because he made a really big jump from 3 to 4. And at the time I thought he was jumping from 4 to 5. Sending the teeth in after I killed him in 2011, he came back as a 4-year-old in 2011. So that's one that I got fooled, even though I had history with the deer all the way back to his age 2. I killed another buck in 2011, one that we had nicknamed Daggers. Same exact scenario. In 2009, had some footage of that buck, and I thought he's either a really big 2-year-old or just an average 3-year-old. We never saw him at all in 2010. So when he popped back up again in 2011, I just naturally assumed that he was a 5-year-old, but ended up killing him right at the very end of October in 2011. And sent the teeth in on that one, and he came back as a 4-year-old also. So I killed 2 really nice 4-year-olds in 2011. I'm not saying that I would have passed those deer had I known they were 4 at that time. I think I would now, but it's just interesting that I had misjudged both of those deer, and I had that history going back to when they were 2. So seems like there's no perfect way to age deer. I've killed bucks before that I knew their age. I knew them to be very old deer, and they ended up, when I killed them, just looking like run-of-the-mill 3-year-olds. They didn't have the features that really would set them apart as being an old, mature deer, but yet I knew they were just from all the years of history that I had with them. If those bucks would have showed up without any of that prior history, I would have for sure assumed that they were younger than they were. Generally, the thing that I look at when I'm trying to age the bucks on the hoof is their faces. If they're narrow, kind of streamlined, thin looking, I'm going to say that that's a younger deer. The other thing I look at too is the body shape. When a buck is younger, I'll call it their midsection, I guess, their abdomen, it doesn't have that sort of a lower stomach line. It comes up. They're more streamlined, not blocky looking. They're more sleek, I would say, looking. So that's going to be another cue that you look at for, a 3-year-old and younger buck. Another thing I look at is whether or not the deer appears to be long-legged. The legs don't actually get shorter as the deer get older. Their bodies just get thicker and they deepen. So a long-legged looking deer, generally, I'm going to jump on that right away as a young buck. But again, some of those can be misleading because just like genetics of people, The deer aren't all big-bodied and husky-looking as they get older. Generally, if you see a real streamlined set of antlers or a real symmetrical, nice and clean rack, that can be just something that you file away as part of the decision-making process, that might be a younger buck too. But again, the antlers can be very misleading. Antlers would be the last thing you look at when you're trying to judge the age of a buck on the hoof. Look at the body, look at the facial features, look at the length of the legs, just the overall amount of skin in the neck area. That's probably the best way to judge a really old deer, is just by how much loose skin they've got around their head and neck. Those are things I look for, but I'm going to give you a couple more examples of bucks that I've hunted over the years and how they've changed as they've gotten older. One of the bucks I want to talk about is a deer that Brett Joy killed a couple of years ago here in Iowa. It was a deer that the guys in the office had scouted out and had some, a little bit of history with that season. They were guessing this buck to be a 3-year-old. Smaller bodied deer. Again, he had more of those fine features of a younger buck. Brett kills it, sends the teeth in to be sectioned and aged, and he comes back as a 5-year-old. So that was a buck that was completely, that we completely misjudged. It didn't have the typical cues that you would rely on if you were trying to guess the age of that deer when he just showed up without any history with that deer. Another one, if you go back and look at Loppy, I killed him in 2012, and I know he was at least 7 the year that I killed him. If you look at him coming across the field here, you'd swear he's a maximum 3 or 4-year-old buck. There's nothing about him that screams 7-year-old buck. And granted, it's in December, and that might have contributed a little bit to his younger appearance. And I guess what I'm really trying to get at is, I don't have any surefire method of aging these things. Without a doubt, the most accurate way is to be able to go back and pick them out of your trail camera photos and identify those deer when they were younger, and then just track them as they get older. So the point is, it isn't that easy, and don't beat yourself up if you get it wrong. If in doubt and you don't mind passing up deer, let them go. We find that more times than not, the deer that we think are older we tend to be judging them a year older than what they actually are. That's more of our tendency than to take a buck that's old and misjudge it as young. Well, hopefully I didn't confuse you with all of this. There's no easy way, short of knowing the deer, to age these things. I used to think we could throw out these certain set of rules and everybody could come up with the ages of the deer, but the more we do this and the more bucks we look at and the more bucks we kill and age, the more we realize that they are so unique and so individual. So do the best you can, kind of take it all with a grain of salt, enjoy your time in the field, and every year you're going to learn a little bit more about how to age these deer. Well, I have not found an antler yet. I guess that's not a big surprise. I'm going to keep covering a little bit of ground, work my way around this patch of timber, and then once I get to the other side, I'll wrap it up for you. Didn't find anything today, but I'll keep looking. Probably got just a few more weeks here of shed hunting, and then I'm going to shift all my efforts over to food plots, get those started, and start to get focused on some of the preparations for this coming fall. Well, that's it for this week. I appreciate you joining me. I'll see you right back here again next week for the next episode of Midwest Whitetail, and remember to always dream big.